This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
Now, prepare yourselves for a Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels special edition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, Scoundrels, and thanks for joining us for this Scoundrels Special Edition. I am your host, Dennis Keithly, and with me, as always, are my friends and co-hosts Jay Krebs and Darth Taxus.
Hey, it's Jay here. I'm really excited to be talking about another Resistance episode. This was a really, really good one. How you doing, Taxus?
Oh, pretty good, Jay. Pretty good. I'm kind of... let's start talking.
Okay.
All right. Well, you can tell he's excited. If you are new to Starship, Sabers, and Scoundrels, then let me welcome you to the show and our special brand of Star Wars discussion and fun. It's definitely one of a kind. Now, let me tell you what a Scoundrels Special Edition is. These are in-between episodes where we forgo analysis of the news and we focus on a particular piece of content, which is usually been an episode of Rebels and currently an episode of Resistance. On this Scoundrel Special Edition, we are reviewing the latest episode of Resistance, which is The Core Problem. So heads up, this is a full spoiler discussion. Taxus, hit that spoiler alert if you would. And if you are still listening, well, we gave you a fair warning. And let's dive right on in. This episode begins with Kaz busy trying to make a communicator strong enough to reach Poe and the Resistance by making it able to bust through the First Order's jamming signal. Yeager's telling him this isn't going to work, but he fires it up and he calls for Poe. And to his surprise, he gets an answer. To his further surprise, it's because Poe is standing right behind him. He's shown up to let him know that he's got to get BB-8 for a mission for General Organa that takes him to Jakku, of all places. So right off the bat, we got some serious consequences set up for this episode.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you're all in from moment one on this one, because as soon as Poe says Jakku, you know where it's going. I mean, you know how close we are to The Force Awakens at this point, and it just gives you chills just to think about it.
Yeah, didn't you say like tomorrow or something like that? The next day. So this episode takes place like what?
It's got to be within a day.
Day of that. Yeah. Right.
And here's the thing. I know I brought this up on a previous edition of the show, but in the comic Poe Dameron 26, you could read right through it without even realizing what you're reading. But when he was telling Rey and Finn while they were aboard the Millennium Falcon after Last Jedi, he's kind of recounting his version of events from The Force Awakens. He makes this allusion to having to take a side trip to pick up BB-8 on his way to Jakku. And I didn't realize at the time, and it wasn't until we got the trailer for the second half of the season of Resistance that I put two and two together. But this just confirmed it, that, it's between the movie, this episode, and the Poe Dameron comic. He's from here to Jakku, and we're headed towards The Force Awakens. So things are about to pick up quite a bit on this show. Not that they have been slow in recent episodes.
Things are about to awaken.
Yes, definitely. I almost had to pinch myself because I thought, oh my gosh, this is right here, right? I mean, oh my gosh, Force Awakens is right here.
Well,
yeah. So I was kind of going crazy, but
and it gets you, and it's like we were talking about in the last episode, where it's sort of like building up and building up and building up, right? Where things seem like they're happening a little bit faster and such, and you know that it's about to go a little grim here in the next couple episodes. I mean, if they keep with the day-to-day timing, right? I mean, I feel like we're going to have less space and time, and we're going to be more to a sequence of days now in these episodes, and especially with the upcoming destruction of Hosnian Prime. So,
exactly. Well, before Poe can leave, Kaz and Yeager insist on kind of telling him about what they discovered in the last episode, the New Trooper, and so they show him that map that they got, and to me, it seemed like they have figured some things out since they first saw that map, because they are talking about how the First Order is moving fuel supplies around, which they didn't really understand when they saw the map on the last time we saw them looking at this map. But they identify some particular coordinates where there's some sort of activity checking out. And once Poe takes a look at it, he decides that, he definitely should go look into this with Kaz before he gets on with this mission for Leia, because, he doesn't want to have like this mystery hanging out there. But, did you guys have any idea? I mean, some big things happen after this, but, at this point in the episode, did you kind of have any idea what we were in store for, or what were you thinking was going on at that point?
Not really. I mean, I was just kind of along for the ride at that point. But, when they started looking at the map and they talked about this area of the unknown regions, and then they were talking about why would the First Order want Colossus Station, and just the idea that, well, it's not that they really want it. They just don't want anyone else to have it. And so that really stuck with me there, too. And then, of course, it made sense, the title of the episode being The Core Problem, once they arrived at their destination in the outer worlds, or the unknown regions. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that really hit me too, Jay. I was thinking, oh, yeah, that's pretty smart. I mean, they realize the resistance is much smaller than they are, and that, like, I guess a refueling station of this size would be perfect for their forces, especially if they're going to engage in rebel-esque style guerrilla action. And to take away your enemy's ability to fight is probably the most perfect form of warfare.
Yeah, I got to tell you, though, part of me is wondering if we have an inconsistency just because there may have been different writers for this episode and the last episode, The New Trooper, because I thought they made a compelling case, although it was briefly in the last episode, that the First Order is getting ready to move out of the unknown regions, and they're going to need like a supply line. And so Colossus Station would be ideal for part of that. And that, to me, seemed like a perfectly good explanation. I mean, so it is too, denying access to your enemies. But if that's the case, why not just swoop in and blow it up? I mean, it's why go to all this subterfuge and all this extra trouble to get Doza, to fool Doza with pirates? That seems like way more trouble than it's worth or necessary.
Dual purpose, Yeah, multiple reasons for the objective. Yeah, I can see that. So now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to move on to the next part unless you have a point you want to raise.
So did we talk about how they get on? Okay, first off, all right, if Poe, you're trying to sneak around and you're wearing your uniform, man.
I thought of that too.
What's up with that?
Yeah,
bright orange uniform with the nice logo on it,
Yeah, but I agree, but I also think he almost directly showed up on the platform. And there's something that comes up late at the very end of this episode that raises a similar question. But that reminded me, one of the things I loved about this, while they're having this conversation, we just see a steady stream of TIE fighters flying outside of the station. I mean, every time you turned around, they're talking about how important this is and how dire the consequences are and oppressive the First Order is. And if you need any proof, look out the window. Right. There's just a TIE fighter after TIE fighter after TIE fighter flying by. So it was a nice atmospheric touch that they added to the episode. But moving on, so they got to get off the Colossus Station in order to go check out these coordinates. And because the First Order is everywhere, this is not going to be easy. So what do? Poe hops on the wing of the Fireball, and thankfully with a breath mask, and then Kaz lowers it out of the station, and they kind of just dump it on top of a cargo ship, and then they allow it to fly out of scanner range from Colossus Station, at which point Poe does a leap from the Fireball into the cockpit of the X-Wing. I have thoughts, but I want to hear yours first. What did you think about this sequence?
Well, they called it the Widowmaker, first of all. Yeah. So, and of course, Kaz did not. He didn't grasp the whole. But I'm not married. Well, it's probably a good thing that you're not, kid, or something along those lines. But yeah, all I could think of was, one wrong little move there, and Poe was really putting a lot of his faith into Kaz's flying ability in doing that maneuver.
Yeah, been there, done that. Show me something impressive. No, I was thinking, literally, if I was doing something like that, or in actuality, if I was doing something like that, I wouldn't be able to stick the landing in the seat. I'd like trip over the control panel and like fall to my doom, you know? Meanwhile, I'd hit the joystick and the X-Wing would just fly into a death spiral immediately, you know? But yeah, that was, I mean, we all knew that Kaz was going to pull out of it, but, you know, the fact that they're using the fireball, I don't know. I guess, is that the more reliable ship now, or is that the one that nobody expects, or what's going on?
That was one of my issues, Taxus. I mean, okay, because the fireball sputters in the middle of all this, and they barely get out of that in time. And then they get up next to the X-Wing, which CB-23 is got control of at the moment. And so she opens the cockpit, and you know, Poe says to Kaz, "Hey, can you get a little bit closer?" And he does that jump. Now, granted, we saw the reverse of this the last time Poe was on the show, the signal from Sector 6 or whatever it might have been,
right,
where Kaz had to jump off into another X-Wing. There's a couple things in this episode that scream space opera, and this is one of those moments, you know, more space opera than less than science fiction. And I loved the sneaking out of Colossus Station, but it was just kind of the okay, I guess you got to work with the tools you have with a fireball, but then just the jumping from the side of a ship into the cockpit seemed more stuntman and less ace pilot to me. But anyway, minor complaint. It is.
Felt like the Fall Guy, something I'd see on the Fall Guy, but in space.
Been a while, but yeah, there you go.
Right.
So they take off on their mission, and they arrive at these coordinates in the unknown regions to discover there's no star. It is completely gone. All that's left are some planets and some moons. I can't remember exactly how Poe describes it, but he says the star must not have exploded, or he's trying to give an explanation to why he thinks everything is so odd. The star is gone, but the planets are around. They're just not decimated, although they've got gigantic holes in them. I can only imagine trying to write this scene, because it would have been kind of, you know, the planets look fine, except other than the fact that their cores are gone.
Yeah.
So they fly into one of these planets that's got a giant hole in the side, and they are having a problem because they encounter a gravity well, even though the core of the planet's gone. But then they get out the other side. So before we get too much farther, did either of you have thoughts on this scene?
Well, I mean, it was obvious that somebody was practicing using some sort of tool and not really being super successful with it until they reached the one where the core was actually completely drawn out of it. And it was, I mean, it's kind of scary, but of course, you know, knowing what we know from The Force Awakens, it makes sense that they would need some sort of test field, test site in order to, you know, possibly do the things that they were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of. This is obviously a weapons testing, you know, I guess the remnants of that. And of course, we know exactly how coreable their weapon is later.
Right.
Yeah. I guess for me, you know, it's again, like I said, this episode screams space opera because there is I am not a physicist, and I feel like I know I mean, I feel like I know a fair amount of science, but where's the gravity coming from on this planet if the core is gone? How is the shell of the planet even together still? You know, how is it not either drifted apart or collapsed in on itself in order to? I just the whole notion that they're flying right through this planet that has no core and that it's still intact just seemed a bit bizarre.
Well, I was thinking, do you really need a core to have a gravity field? Because gravity, I mean, isn't the larger the mass of the object is, the bigger the gravity field?
Right, but my understanding of planetary physics is that the core of the planet is usually the center of the gravity of the planet. And if you remove the core, you remove some of the densest matter in the planet, why hasn't it then further collapsed on itself or just fallen apart? I'm not sure what's holding this planet together at this point.
Yeah,
well, it does say in Bucket's list. Yeah, if you took a look at Bucket's list, it did talk about that. It said that a gravity well is any concentration of gravity that affects starship navigation. And then it goes on to say the one at the heart of the cored planetoid may be a strange mix of both a side effect of technology as well as a natural, like the one found in the heart of the Kessel Run. So they try to kind of explain it in that way, that it was sort of this weird kind of hybrid Frankensteinish gravity well.
But
Yeah,
So-
don't get me wrong. I mean, I read that too. I enjoyed this episode, and we'll get to some more things here in a second. It's just that there's some really weird science things, and
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
science.
I'll be the first to excuse the explosions in space and sound traveling through space, and the fact that in The Force Awakens you could see the blast from Starkiller Base no matter where you were in the galaxy
Yeah.
as it was striking planets and things like that. It's just that it seemed like they not just doubled down on this type of thing in this episode, they quadrupled down on it with some of the choices they made. And that explanation that they gave in Bucket's List, it's an explanation. I'm not sure that it really said anything other than just kind of, give me a reason, anything type of thing. But
Well, I
there
was
it is.
thinking that too when they were flying in. I was thinking, now wait a minute, the planet's still largely intact, even though you're going to have some sort of gravity effect on there. But it kind of acted more like a wild rapids ride, and it kind of sucked them out the other side instead of just saying depositing them in the center of the planetoid. You know what I mean?
And that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, how are they going to reverse this? I was expecting some sort of a slingshot maneuver or something like that to get them back out, but instead they just ended up going right through. But anyway,
like
there
wet
it is.
and wild.
We kind of belabored the point.
Slip
but
and slide.
I just, So they get through this planet and they detect a signal from a nearby moon and decide to investigate. They land near a settlement where they detect that there's oxygen in some sort, of an atmosphere. It's a little cold. You kind of see Kaz shivering and holding his arms as they get out to investigate. They find that this village, this settlement's been attacked, and it's in ruins. The only thing that they really find that's intact at all is Kaz finds a Tuca doll, which we remember from the Clone Wars, and then there was one in Jin had one in Rogue One, when she was a child. But other than that, they realize the First Order's been here. They've decimated everything. And then not only that, Jay, you read the Buckets List, and I don't know if you had an opportunity, Taxus, but that same signal that was on one of the kids' bracelets and the children from Tahar is here in this village.
Right.
So there's a very good chance that this is with the children from Tahar's home.
Right.
Or their people, and the First Order came in and cleaned them out.
Yeah, and that just gives you the chills even just to think about. And how incredibly ironic would it be that Tuca doll would be Isla's?
Yeah,
Could you imagine that connection happening?
Yeah, Kaz brings it home with him, so that would be interesting if it comes up later in the season. But again, I'm only going to spend about 20 seconds on this, and then we'll move on. Again, the space opera function of this. How is there an atmosphere left on this moon? Because the sun's gone.
Yeah,
I mean, there's this whole system should have drifted apart. Whatever was holding this moon intact or even close to the planet, which had its core removed, is gone. There shouldn't be enough gravity to keep that in place. So again,
should be freezing cold.
Yeah,
I mean, not just cold, but
they should be able to see.
That too, right? Exactly.
But anyways,
that's a good point.
We just go with it.
If I ever excuse science in the future, y'all could just remind me of this when it comes to Star Wars. But so they don't get too long to wonder about this before a First Order probe droid kind of comes out after them. This thing was unique. I'll let one of you two describe it. What did you think about this probe droid?
Looked like
Well,
a
it's
golf
definitely
tee.
a new design. Yeah, it did, kind of, yeah. It was definitely a new design. It kind of had that conical shape to it. And you're right, it did kind of look like a golf tee. And then, as Poe said, it started having kids. He's like, kids, it's got kids.
Yeah.
And they basically look like little training remotes is what they look like.
Indeed.
So,
And the noise that one of them
my first
made was
impression.
like from the Phantom Menace. How about that? When the... No, it was from
Yes.
Revenge
No,
of the
you're right.
Sith. Wasn't it from when Obi-Wan's R2 unit, the head comes off from the buzz droids? And he goes, woo, woo, or something like that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So it made that noise coming out, and I had to rewind it because I was like, wait a minute, But so that was cool. I mean, part of me was kind of like, okay, it's the de facto probe droid. You know what I mean? They're trying to build up the whole, something sneaking around watching for them. But, that's fine. The First Order likes leaving robots around that we've seen now in previous facilities, I guess, to keep an eye on things. I mean, why not? It's probably cheap. But I almost felt like this thing was kind of armored. because of the way it was designed with the trifolds.
Yeah, to your point, Taxus, I agree with you. It's kind of become a Star Wars staple. If you think back to when we just covered Clone Wars recently in Defenders of Jedi Crash and Defenders of Peace, the Separatists had a little probe droid sitting there on the planet looking out for things, on the planet that they had, the Empire used them in The Empire Strikes Back, when they were trying to find the rebels. We've seen them time and again. They show up. It's you can never be too careful. We may be done here, but someone may come to investigate it, and we can't have anyone figuring things out. So we'll leave a probe droid, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I kind of like this thing. The action sequence that follows is Poe taking on the children, in quotes, while Kaz has been tasked with shooting down the probe itself. But BB-8 has to use its little magnetic cable in order to grab the thing before it flew out of his way, because Kaz cannot hit anything with a
not
blaster.
On purpose anyway.
No, he trips and the gun goes off.
That was funny.
Which was, there was a moment like right before this while they're investigating the village and he trips and the gun goes off.
Yeah.
And Poe was just like deadpans, like, be careful, guys.
Be careful.
He didn't even basically flinch at that one.
Yeah.
Well, I was analyzing, Kaz and his firearms, I guess, safety. And first off, don't walk around with your finger on the trigger of the blaster, Kaz. Just saying, that's step one. Number two, when you're shooting, you're jerking your shots, buddy. The trigger should be smooth like butter. He was sitting there like stabbing the gun, the blaster at the droid. You know what I mean? And so I got to say kudos to them for the action, because I don't know if you've ever gone out with somebody that can't shoot to save their life. They kind of do that. You know what I mean? They're just stabbing, like they're literally trying to propel the round at the target. You know what I mean? And really, ideally, he should just be calm and maybe not shoot BB-8 in the back like he did.
No, you're right, Texas. Similar things happen in archery. I've seen people that are holding a bow and they're like trying to push the arrow.
Yes.
Towards the target, as opposed to letting the string go and letting the action of the bow take care of it itself. Mm-hmm. And we commented on this when he was playing that video game in Tora's room where they had to shoot the hollow probes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I guess he did to the extent that there was any requirement in the Republic Navy, that you had to be proficient with a sidearm. He must have barely qualified because it's just not amongst his skills when it comes down to it. I mean, and let's face it. I mean, we've seen him be fairly proficient in an X-wing early in the season, and then again when they went to Signal Sector 6. But I think really when it comes to Kaz, his best skill is his dedication and his determination more than his ability to actually do a whole lot of things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
By far.
He's a true believer.
But to put a wrap on the probe droid, so Poe manages to shoot down the children probes, and Kaz blasts the mama probe. When he trips over a rock and squeezes the trigger and it hits it right in the head.
Right.
They don't have a whole lot of time to recover from this before the First Order shows up in TIE fighters, led by Major Von Reg and his red TIE Interceptor, and they begin strafing runs on them. Poe has CB-23 warm up his X-wing, and they get in their ships and they start heading towards the planet that they came through that had just been hollowed out because they're outnumbered by the TIE fighters. Once they get there, the gravity has a more of an effect on the TIE fighters than it did on the X-wings, and then Poe gets to pull off that fancy maneuver where he spins around and shoots one of them. All the TIE fighters perish except for Major Von Reg, who gets away. But so it was good to see some confrontation again between the First Order and the Resistance. I kind of think those are some of my favorite moments of the series so far.
Yeah.
But
Jay?
I had my thing on mute. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was like,
oh my gosh.
Someone's got something to say.
Yeah. No, I was actually what I was going to ask was, why is it that, I'm sure you guys probably know more about the way that these different kinds of ships are created and whatnot. So why did it have more an effect on the TIE fighters than on the X-Wings? I mean, is there a specific reason in the way that they're constructed?
Well, you see,
That's
Jay,
kinda
when you're
confusing.
analyzing your gravity well, you have to understand that the ionization that's passing through it happens to sync up with the TIE fighter's ion engines exactly. Okay, so they're not. I think it was just a wind blowing them around.
I was waiting for him to run out of when the wind and his sails on.
So it's a magnetic-like organization kind of thing.
I am trying to remember which book I read sometime recently where it may have been a Legends book, so it wouldn't even necessarily count. But in an effort to capture a rebel craft or something, an Imperial Star Destroyer deployed its tractor beam, and the pursuing TIEs got caught and got ripped apart because of the way that they were manufactured was not as sturdy as the Rebellion craft. So I don't know. Maybe they're carrying forth that same
I
same
could see
logic.
that. Or maybe.
But,
They always said that TIE fighters were kind of disposable in a way. They didn't even have shields or anything to them. So,
but not the first orders. They've got shields.
Yeah.
But you know, the other thing is they described on the episode guide on StarWars.com that the X-wings just kind of Poe figured out how they just kind of had to go with the flow of this gravity well.
That's true.
And so they were able to glide right through it. Maybe it's the shape of the craft. The TIE fighters can't necessarily glide through the flow. I don't know. Star Wars science, physics this episode. Go figure. It's all over the place.
And hey, how about CB8? CB8?
CB-23?
CB-23. Yeah, that one. Taking out a TIE fighter.
yeah.
Yeah, she was
That was
quite
pretty
a good
cool.
shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a she, which is interesting that, they gave her a gender. So,
They should give
Well,
her a
we were
blaster instead of
seeing that
Kaz.
more and more.
Yeah, because we what was it, the signal from Sector 6 with the Kowakian Ape Lizard and CB-23 and BB-8 were kind of heading it off back then, and
Right,
we speculated
true.
about them BB-8 having a new girlfriend. So
Making little BB babies.
I don't know about that, but so they've escaped the First Order, and now they've got Poe's got to go to Jakku. Kaz has got to get back to Colossus Station. First things first, they got to swap droids. So they do a mid-space droid exchange where
Like a
CB-23,
ballet.
yeah, and BB-8, they both eject from the droid port, the astromech port on the ships, and they cross and they give each other that little salute as they are flying through the air. I don't know. I kind of like that scene.
Yeah, I was. The Blue Danube was playing in my head when that happened, but like little waltz.
You know, it was that. There were some serious moments of this episode, but that one really kind of hit home with the consequences about what was about to go on.
Yeah.
Right.
Kaz was a little disappointed that he was losing his friend BB-8. Poe's been alluding to this mission, and but then he was really happy to have BB-8 back, and the music that they composed for the scene really underscored the drama and the tension and everything else that was the importance of about what was about to happen there. I thought that was very well crafted overall.
Agreed. And the whole ending of it too, especially when they got back and Tam was saying, okay, so
Yeah, we're gonna get to that in just a second.
sorry, I'm
It's
skipping
okay.
ahead.
'Cause, yeah. One last thing though is that so Kaz says, Poe, one last thing. How do I get back onto Colossus Station? He's got a point, because the place is surrounded by First Order TIE fighters. Poe's response is CB-23 knows. And sure enough, she did, because the next time we see Kaz, he's on Colossus. We have no idea what it is that they did to get onto the station.
Right.
I guess it doesn't matter, but when we're talking about gravity wells and this like that, they just kind of, they just kind of skipped over the details in this one. It's like the plot is he needs you back on Colossus Station, so he got back onto Colossus Station. They needed to have, as a plot device, they needed this gravity well later to beat the TIE fighters. So here it is. Here we're introducing the gravity well earlier in the episode, and they figured out a way to get through it. I don't have to have the answers for everything, but again, in an episode where it is you're dealing with science fiction and space opera, and you've already got the implausible right there, but you're piling on the implausible on top of the implausible. Like I said earlier, you're not just doubling down on this, you're quadrupling down on all this stuff.
Yeah.
It just was slightly annoying to me.
It flies in the face of the science of sneaking on board things.
That's one way of looking at it. But and then as to your point, alluding to Jay, so they're back on Colossus Station. Yeager, Niku, and Tam are working on a ship, which the Buckets List points out is just a repaint of Jace Rucklin's ship that they cobbled together for this episode. Tam's already angry because there's work to be done and Kaz is nowhere to be found. She's having a play on words disagreement with Bucket. It's like, this Bucket's had 2 manifolds that have gone back, and then the Bucket reacts, and she's like, no, not you, Bucket, this Bucket. And, a little bit of forced humor, but there it was. And then Kaz shows up with CB-23, surprising everybody. Tam wants to know what happened with the fireball. Kaz reports, well, it's down below. He had taken it out for a spin. And then Tam asks, well, what's with this new droid? Or she called it a Rolly. And, to which Kaz said, oh, yeah, BB-8, he needs repairs, and I took him to Takadana. So he's thinking on his feet. But, Tam's getting upset here, and Yeager's not really helping anything matter by just saying, you wouldn't understand. And she's like, well, you're not giving me the opportunity to understand. So what did you make? Jay, you brought it up first. What did you make of the conclusion here?
I feel like Tam is going to get fed up at some point, and she's going to try to do some uncovering of her own, and it might get her into a pretty bad situation because she's so frustrated at this point that she doesn't have any answers, and she feels like she's being slighted, and I think she might get a little desperate, and I don't know. We're going to see.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if she's maybe unwittingly going to somehow become some sort of plot device that could get people in trouble,
Yeah, I think she's got a point. She's sitting here in the middle of this garage. She's not blind. She sees that Kaz is up to something. Kaz is lousy in attempting to convince her otherwise that there's something going on. She knows Yeager knows what's going on, but Yeager doesn't see fit to trust her with the truth. So I can't blame her for being frustrated with what's going on, especially since it's happening right in front of her. And then, Kaz doesn't even tell a good lie to cover it up. It's almost kind of insult. If I was in that position, I'd find it insulting. It's like, just tell me that I can't tell you that it's important. Something's happening, but I can't go. Now, as we've talked about, Kaz is not a trained spy. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but I feel like Yeager could probably figure out a way to handle this better.
Yeah, to say, oh, you wouldn't understand. It's more condescending than anything. And you're right. If that was me, I'd have been like, excuse me?
Yeah. I mean, because there was that entire exchange at the end. Tam asks Yeager what's going on. Yeager says, I quote, none of your concern.
Yeah.
And she's like, wait a minute. Kaz is suspicious with the fireball and then comes back with a new droid and she can't even ask about it. And Yeager's like, there's certain things you understand. And she says, because you won't let me. You won't give me a chance with this. And yeah, I can see her being frustrated. And this, you're right, Jay, this has been coming for episodes.
Yeah.
She's wondered about where Kaz disappears to, and if he's supposed to be this mechanic, why is he so lousy at fixing things in the garage? And how is it he knows these weird things about Colossus Station? And so and complicating things is that Niku gets brought into all this stuff, and if you can trust the alien that has a hard time controlling what he says, why can't you trust her?
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of felt sorry for Niku with the BB-8 thing.
Yeah, he really missed BB-8.
Yeah, we were. What did he say? We were bonding, so so.
Niku didn't have a big role in this episode, but I really do like what they've done with him the past few episodes.
He's grown.
He's grown, and they've also kind of figured out what the right level with him is, and because he takes everything so literally, but not being. They overdid it, I think, sometimes, but I think they kind of found the right level with him lately. But
see, I got the excuse that Kaz can just use from now on. I mean, I'm just saying it's foolproof.
What's that?
Where'd you go? Oh, kind of started drinking, got a little bender. I don't know. I don't know how I got off the ship and how I got back, but I did. Hey, surprise! Nobody will question you.
Yeah, I think the only problem with that is he'd have to come back smelling like alcohol.
Yeah, and plus there'd probably be an intervention at some point. But
right. But everyone ends this episode. Well, everyone but Tam. She's just angry. But Kaz, Poe, Yeager, everyone's pretty worried about what's coming next. And as we discussed, good reason. So, that kind of does it for the discussion overall. Why don't we go around and give our final thoughts on and grades on this episode? So, Jay, take it away.
Well, I did like this episode. I do feel like we've been saying for a while now that it's going in the right direction. It's picking up momentum, and by golly, we're right before The Force Awakens. So you talk about momentum, this one definitely has it. And of course, we get to see Poe, which is always amazing. And we do get a little bit of, some gaps filled in here and there, but yet others that are still needing filled. I did like the new introduction of the probe droid. I thought that was interesting. Like you said, some of the scientific kinds of things sort of were like, okay, whatever. I do feel for Tam. So, there's still a lot of things going on here that are definitely good plot points, good things to develop. And overall, I'm going to give it an A-. Good episode.
Taxus?
Yeah, I was going to do the A-, but I gotta say it was a fun episode. Kept my attention. I really loved the failed blaster techniques. Felt a little off about BB-8 getting hit by a blaster bolt and nothing happening. So
just kind of bounced, ricocheted off.
Yeah. So either he's really tough, or it was just a unlucky or a lucky shot, to where it just glanced off of him or something and just looked worse than it was. But that was kind of funny when he came back down. He was a little woozy. But because of the fact that it's like so close to The Force Awakens, and it kind of made me perk up, and go, oh, here we go. I'm gonna give it an A because it's definitely got my attention. I definitely can't wait to see what happens next.
Okay, that's good. I probably came off as harsh in talking about this episode, and I really don't mind a lot of the Star Wars physics, the explosions in space, the sound in space, just some of these things we know that's just not the way it works in our galaxy. I can look past that. The reason why it bothered me in this episode is it seemed to stand out that they took some of these things and they compounded them, but there it is. That being said, there was a lot to like in this episode. Oscar Isaac's coming back to voice Poe Dameron, and the lines he got, just that nonchalant dismissal of Kaz tripping and shooting the blaster was funny. When Kaz was trying to hit the probe droid and as you were pointing out, Taxus, the blast went off a BB-8. It's like, Kaz, which droid are you trying to hit? The sarcasm he delivers that. Oscar Isaacs is a great actor, and he did a really great job with his voice performance in this episode. I really appreciated that.
Yeah,
I liked them sneaking out of Colossus Station up until the point where they had to jump out of the, had to jump off the side of the fireball into the X-wing. But then, as Jay was saying, we get back to Colossus Station and getting the performance from Tam and how upset she was with what's going on, and she doesn't feel like she's being treated fairly in this situation. And then again, moving the story along, again, what you were saying, Jay, with the consequences are starting to build up, and we know we're about to see something really dramatic happen. We were leading right into the events of The Force Awakens. So those things were all fantastic. All that being said, I've been bouncing back and forth between an A- and a B+, and so I'm going to kind of split the difference and give it a 90. On some scales, that's an A-. On some scales, that's considered a B+. So you can decide whatever you want for it. But that's where it is for me. It's a good episode. I highly recommend it. I hope everyone sees it and enjoys it. And, it's kind of funny. Earlier in the season, I wasn't necessarily looking forward to Resistance on a weekly basis, but I am looking forward to the next episode this week and seeing where they go from here and how we're going to get closer to the events of The Force Awakens. So that's saying something for the series.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our discussion of the core problem. Before we go, what's going on in your all's universes that our Scoundrels can look forward to?
As usual for me, you can find me right here on Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels, and you can also find my archive blogs over at Coffee with Kenobi and my Core Worlds Couture fashion review blogs as well. And we will have a new That's So Wizard coming out here very soon, so y'all can be looking for that one too.
And you can find me over on the Geek Supreme with Scott Murray, Jeff McGee, and Regina Davis. And that's on every Tuesday. It's just a fun little geek topic. This week's was the Geek Oscars, also called the Goscars. Thought I was pretty clever with coming up with that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed,
that's the kind of high quality programming you get. That's right.
As for me, you can find my comic reviews on RetroZap.com, and each month I'm talking Star Wars comics with Jovial J. Shepard on Jedi Journals. They have their 100th monthly episode coming up this March, so make sure you tune into that and join in the fun. With the return of Discovery, my wife and I have been covering each new episode on our Star Trek podcast, Warp Trails. And that comes out each Saturday on the RetroZap.com podcast feed. If you want to find us on social media, we are at SQPod on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook at facebook.com/SQPod. You can email the show at sqpod@retrozap.com. You can follow Darth Taxus on Twitter at Darth Taxus. Jay is at Joyce Krebs, and I am at DJKVER2. Speaking of RetroZap, we are a proud part of the RetroZap.com podcast network. Darn it, I tripped up this week. The network currently features more than a dozen shows covering everything from retro gaming, movies, collecting, and a whole ton of Star Wars. You subscribe to the network feed and get all the shows in one place. We'd love a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and tell your friends, especially the ones that like Star Wars, about our show. Heck, help them subscribe if they don't know how. Not everyone knows what a podcast is, much less how to download one. And so anything you can do to spread the word would be fantastic. Really appreciate it. That's going to do it for this Scoundrel Special Edition. We'll talk to you soon with another edition of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Until then, may the Force be with you.